if Russia doesn't get any long-term peace on its western border as a result of that, well, let's be honest, with the current generation of EU political and foreign policy elite, that was never going to happen anyway. There was no way that this conflict is going to end. They are pitched to such a degree of jingoistic, racist, anti-Russian, not just political, but cultural, social settlement in Europe right now. I mean, they've in the Baltics, in Estonia, they've just removed the right of ethnic Russians to vote because they're ethnic Russians, right? Not because even they've dared to voice support for what Russia, Russia's intervention in Ukraine. No, just for being ethnic Russians, right? That goes even beyond the idea of collective punishment, which was supposedly a core EU value, that collective punishment is not an acceptable thing, right? Much less the approving of the attacks on the religion, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the banning of 21 plus political parties in Ukraine, right? The silencing of all critical media in the country, again and again. What freedoms, right? I can't wear a St. George ribbon, orange and black, reflecting the right of, the memory of the Soviet victory in the defeat of Nazi Germany, whose 80th anniversary we settled on May 9th. If I'm in Germany or elsewhere in the EU, I would be imprisoned.
So disturbing. That's so disturbing.
Give me the Nazis. Just stop with all the lectures on democracy and your pretense at moral superiority. We just laugh and ignore at that anymore. It's not even something that is reflexively considered anymore. We're the bad guys. No, you are the bad guys, right? The Europeans, the Americans, you're the bad guys. That's it. We don't even reflexively consider your shrill voices to the opposite.
Europe has gone nuts. And as I told my ex, you guys are losing your mind. It's unrecognizable in a very bizarre way. I mean, not even just the Russian thing, destroying the Romanian elections, for example, putting Le Pen in jail, the way they've treated Hungary, they have taken this hysterical war footing where it's almost like losing in Ukraine pops something off in their minds that they just.
We have always been at war with Eurasia. I mean, it's George Orwell, right? I mean,
I know, but right Jesus Christ, man, it's like 500 years or more have passed. I know.
The Russians are still the barbarians on the fringes of Europe and have always been there. That is always anti-hatred of Russians is the new acceptable anti-Semitism. Let's be honest about that. Well, when they're banning Tchaikovsky concerts and Russian books and universities and Russian breed cats or Russian named trees from competitions, for Christ's sake, they are. It is an insane asylum, and ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, what happened is that this is mostly driven by the elite, right? Whether it's the political elite, the media elite, right? The academia elite, it's all the same thing. Right? It's driven by the elite. Doesn't mean that the public doesn't take it on board, right? But it's driven by the elite. And I think ultimately it's that the European elite has come to believe in US-led Western global hegemony more than the current US administration does. And a big part of that is the ideology, the messianic supremacist ideology of exceptionalism, right? Originally American exceptionalism, the Europeans now quite clearly have been mentally colonized, right, to have the same opinion, where they believe that they are societally, structurally, and morally superior to every other people. That's that whole Burrell garden in the jungle racist narrative that they they just look shocked when you call it out, right? How could you deny that Europe is the shining civilization, with the U.S. military muscle, right, is the shining civilization of the world. And the fact that a barbarian country, right, a barbarian authoritarian country, right, not real Democrats like us, of course, right, that they derided as a gas station or Nigeria with snow. They can't beat us. We can't accept being beaten by them, because that then challenges their own identity, their own conception of themselves as that exceptional civilization, right? They just can't accept the outcomes, right? It shatters their conception of the world and of their place in that world. They just collectively can't come to grips with that. They're in effect in the same kind of delusional headspace that Zelensky is in, that Biden, such as he had any conscious thought.
Yeah, it's an autopin. I guess my thing is, so Trump is effectively presented with two sides that want to maintain the war, with one side being delusional enough to maintain the war. I mean, it's a complete delusion if you keep going, right? Especially when it's clear as day, you can't replace your manpower. You're losing and you're being pushed back on multiple fronts. And at this point, you're talking about bringing kids, like 18-year-olds, into the conflict, women into the conflict, because you can't keep your manpower up. And the other side that can replace their losses. And even, I was looking at some of the numbers, it seems like the losses are increasing for the Ukrainian side and decreasing from the Russian side. So it's like one side is like, we can do this all year. We're okay with keeping this going. We're good.
Yeah, we don't want to, right?
Yeah, because we don't want to, right?
Whatever casualties we're suffering every day, a fraction of yours are still too many, right? And as far as Russians are concerned, this is voiced again. They regard that the Ukrainian nation, right, such as it is, right, the Ukrainian people have been hijacked, that they have a cancer, that something has gone wrong up here, and they need to save them. They don't want to kill Ukrainians, right? They say it again and again. They said it from the beginning. We're not at war with the Ukrainian people. In fact, for a big portion of the Ukrainian people, we're here to save you from the regime, the Westbacked regime that has been attacking you for the last decade, right? We're except for the Banderites, right? That's the exception, right? What is called denazification, which goes far more than just getting rid of Zelensky. Zelensky actually didn't start out that way. He internalized all of that when he became the leader of that regime, right? He absorbed it. I don't know. We want to call it Stockholm syndrome. I don't even know what to call it, but he absorbed that. Right? It is the regime. The regime needs to be torn down. And I have been honest from the beginning that I saw no way for that to be reasonably accomplished, right? The denazification, I prefer to call it correctly, the debanderization of Ukraine, without regime change in Kiev. Regime change complete and total, and I don't see how that could be possible without, whether they come marching in or they come fighting in without Russian troops on the ground in Kiev. I don't see how that could be accomplished otherwise, right? How do you stop the Banderites from maintaining position and political power in the country? How do you lustrate them out of Ukrainian politics the way they lustrated out, right, all Eastern Ukrainian political voices when they seized power in 2014? It's not possible without physical control of the country. They did it largely with Banderite militias, because the country was so weak and fragile, starting in 2014. And eventually, we see Azov is now a core, the first core of the new restructured Ukrainian army, which is just putting a new branding on it in the middle of a war, right? But this is expansion and the entrenchment of Azov, echoes the entrenchment of the Nazi Party and the Waffen SS in Nazi Germany, in World War II.
If you had to estimate, how long do you think, let's assume for the moment that Trump is telling the truth, which is a hard thing to assume because it's Trump. And he's like, all right, Zelensky is going to work with the Europeans to kill the deal. The Russians are working with me, but they don't really want a deal. And even maybe I could get one with the Russians, but Zelensky is not going to take the deal. I'm walking. I'm done. Wipe hands. I'm gone. How long does it take, do you think, them to fall? I mean, it seems like the military is getting weaker and weaker day in and day out, which makes what Zelensky is doing even more just astonishing. And a question was asked to Trump about European peacekeepers. He said, hey, what do you think about European peacekeepers in Russia? He was like, I love peacekeepers. Peacekeepers are awesome. No issue. What he didn't say, though, is we're going to back them. Right? No security guarantees. That mineral deal that they're supposed to sign on Thursday has no security guarantees associated with it. And from Trump's point of view, if you want to go into Russia and get shot in the face, God bless you, we're not coming to your rescue. He has said that all the way through. And even in answering that question, he never said anything about America coming in. They are going to have a collective shit fit when Russia takes Ukraine entirely and the military collapses. It is going to be a clear loss. No more, this is a stalemate. No more Ukraine is holding its own. It's, oh my God, the military has fundamentally collapsed and Russia is now taking Ukraine. How long is that? Like, is that a year? Is that 6 months? Is that 2 years?
If you're listening to the Kiev regime now, they are saying that with just European support, they have increased drone production, and that's all they need is drones, right? Never mind, of course, the fact that yes, they're making more drones than they were at the start of this conflict, right? And statements from certain Ukrainian officials that say that their new giant drone production facilities are thousands of kilometers from the contact line, which you do the math, that puts it in Poland or Germany. That's where the drone factories are being, safely out of Russian reach for the moment, right? They believe that they can fight Russia just with drones, right? I would say, first of all, drones are obviously an increasingly important, part and the nature of this conflict, the way the war and the technology has evolved since 2022. But you can't accomplish everything with drones. And then there is the fact that Russian industrial scale drone production is still several times larger, right? And this has previously been admitted to even by the head of the Kiev regime's, autonomous vehicles, their drone head in the military, that Russia is outproducing them 4 to 5 times. So I don't see how that's possible. But I would not be surprised if the Kiev regime can, if they, do conscript 18 to 25-year-olds, and then potentially women as well. They can drag it out for another year, 2 years, right? It's possible, right? A lot of it depends on how much Russia is willing to risk to go big, right? To try to end it, right? What is the calculus by the Stavka, by the Russian military, right? Is our casualties more if we continue to attrit them away with the same strategy that has been effective for us now, a war of attrition, or would in the long run, if it's clear that we have to take Kiev and perhaps further, right, to go for broke and launch, some maneuver warfare that would go after Kiev, right, which would, need somewhere between 300 and 500,000 troops that Russia does have, right, just in the SMO forces. But I think that if it becomes necessary to occupy all of Ukraine, then Russia will have to mobilize people. The voluntary contract soldiers will not be enough. They'll have to call up more reserves.
Would they be accepted? Because I would imagine that's the fear, right? You don't want to in some political instability where you're calling.
That's the fear. It would be accepted. There would be more than the almost non-existent, disagreement within Russia. Now, of course, there would be more, right? But as long as it was restricted to reservists, and Russia does have some 1.7 million reservists, it could still call up, right? Before doing what the Kiev regime has done, forcible conscription of the civilian population, for that would never, become necessary in any foreseeable forecast, unless we're talking total war with the U.S. and NATO. That's the only point where that would become necessary. But they could still drag out the war. A lot of people think that, if the U.S. Trump walks away, that the conflict will be over next month or in 2 months or something. I
heard 6 months. Yeah. You're skeptical of that.
Too much is contingent. Yeah, I'm skeptical of that, right? Russia has advancing, but the advancement is still an advancement of local collapses of the Kiev regime military, not total collapses, right? They're increasingly, as we've just pointed out, doing production in Europe, right? Ukrainians working at factories, as whatever you want to consider them within European countries. And can the Europeans replace the US? No. Can they drag this out potentially longer? Right? Yeah, probably. Ultimately, I would be more worried about the manpower question causing a collapse of the Ukrainian military at some point in the next year than I would be about a complete lack of arms, right? And again, remember that the U.S. military-industrial complex still has long-term contracts that Biden served on artillery shells, on this, on that. And there has been nothing from the Trump administration that they would block those contracts, even if they walked away, that those would continue. So to say that the U.S. would be completely removed from the conflict, even if they sent no new weapons packages, is wrong.
Not so much. Mark.
Yeah. So they can drag it out. They can drag it out and make it hard and bloody. But that's nothing that Russia hasn't considered and dealt with for the last 3 years.
Mark Sleboda, you are fantastic, man. Great, just fantastic rundown. I know a lot of people on this channel may know how all of this stuff started. The history lesson, I think, sometimes is necessary. And I do it in my videos too. It's like, dude, you guys are getting a snapshot. Like, meaning when the media talks about it, NPR, they may say, Russia invaded and Putin wants Europe. And that's all. Like, that is the entire snapshot of the way they talk about it. And so that is repeated over and over. And so people in their minds, like you said, in Europe, when the US come to the, well, he just invaded, right? He just wants all of Europe. And it's like, no, that is nonsense. Like, that doesn't, they make a villain as opposed to somebody who's a rational actor and doing something for their own security interests. It's very weird in America and the way they talk about it. Even though with Trump in, the opinion is split in a weird way. And they're nuts. They're nuts on this issue. I'm sorry, they are. Mark Sleboda.
Hungary and Slovakia excluded.
Yes. yes. Yeah, those are the only two that have been more sane on this. Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can find him on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1. You can also find him on his channel, Real Politics with Mark Sleboda. That's on YouTube at facebook.com/Gramsci. Mark, are you anywhere else? Just
Facebook is already, for grandparents and stuff, mostly. Not that there's not some grandparents out there listening, but you can follow me on Elon Musk's Twitter X at Mark Sleboda1, or at on Substack or Telegram at The Real Politique with Mark Sleboda.
You're fantastic, man. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. Have a good day.
You as well.